You are listening to the Real Men Feel Show with your hosts, Andy Grant and Appio Hunter. Real Men Feel is all about encouraging men to allow and express all of their emotions. Despite what you may have been taught, all emotions do serve you. Real Men Feel is committed to opening up discussions that most men aren't having, but you certainly don't need to be a man to join us. The Real Men Feel podcast is produced live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern for your growth and enjoyment. You can find more information about the Real Men Feel movement at realmenfeel.org. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe on iTunes by visiting realmenfeel.org/iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter at realmenfeel.org and at facebook.com/realmenfeelshow. All links mentioned in each episode are in the show notes found on the blog at realmenfeel.org. This is a weekly program, and your comments, feedback, and participation are welcome during the live show and anytime in the Facebook group, on Twitter, or at realmenfeel.org. Now, let's get into this week's show. Hello, and welcome to Real Men Feel. This is your host, Andy Grant. Here in the United States, this is the week of Thanksgiving. So if you're listening to this around Thanksgiving, I give thanks to you for listening. And even if you're not listening to this around Thanksgiving, we give you thanks for being part of the Real Men Feel community, being listeners to the show, and all of that. This is episode 71. Astounding. I think when we started this, well, it was a year and a half ago now. I think like, maybe I wonder if we'll make a second one. And now we have 71 shows later. So with me as always is my good friend, a fellow coach, another man willing to feel it all, Mr. Appio Hunter.
Hey, Andy. It's been, I've missed our weekly chats, our weekly shows, but taking a break has actually been good too, because it's given us a chance to, renew and recharge and to feel a lot in the process. So it's great.
Yeah, so what's been going on. So tonight we're being joined by Owen Sharp. He's the CEO of the Movember Foundation. Now, I've heard of Movember for the last few years probably, but I don't know much about it. So Owen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So, let's start with the basics. What is Movember?
It's a great question. Movember is, in many ways, I think, one of the most inspiring story of what men can do. 13 years ago, a few guys getting together in Melbourne in Australia came up with the idea that they would like to do something to raise some money and to make people a bit more aware about prostate cancer. And they came up with a fantastically simple but powerful idea of saying, why don't we grow a moustache for 1 month of the year, bring back the moustache. And that year, they managed to get together about 30 friends to do it. And now we sit here 13 years later, and Movember is heading towards having raised, getting on close for $1 billion worth of money, probably being the biggest single funder of prostate cancer research and one of the leading voices now in mental health issues for men. So it genuinely is a case of kind of showing that movement of change that can happen, that comes from men. So, it's a real inspiration, and it's quite simply based on the idea of having this daft thing on your face every month.
Well, I live with daft things on my face month to month myself, but it's mostly out of laziness. I haven't used it to promote a good cause like this. But, I saw that what I loved, the Movember Foundation had this summation of just one simple goal, and it was to stop men dying too young.
Yeah.
And I love the power and simplicity of that. Appio and I both have had a history of depression. I'm a survivor of multiple suicide attempts. So depression, suicide prevention, suicide awareness, the risk factors in men. It's been a subject that we've covered many times on the show with guests, with our personal lives. So again, I'm psyched that you're here. I'm psyched of how much you've grown. How did you originally get involved yourself?
So my original involvement in Movember came, so the role that I worked for, you may have guessed from my strange dulcet tones that I'm not from the US, I'm from the UK.
What?
I know it's hard. I'm trying to disguise it, but it's not worked. I worked for the biggest prostate cancer charity in the UK, which is Prostate Cancer UK, which is one of the main leading partners of Movember in the UK. I ended up working at Prostate Cancer UK because a long time ago, when I was much younger and less grey, I'm a nurse by background. I trained in Glasgow in Scotland, was primarily a trauma and an emergency nurse working in accident emergency rooms. And I've seen the impact of men not looking after their health or struggling with their health all through my professional career. So couldn't be prouder to do the job that I do today.
Yes, definitely. Now, I'm curious. So Movember started off as to raise awareness for prostate cancer in particular. When did it start to branch out into other areas of men's health, particularly such as the mental health aspect of it?
That started probably sort of 5 or 6 years after it had been up and running. And because it started in Australia, the first place that it decided to branch out was into mental health in Australia, where it had been going longest as a campaign. Mm-hmm. And the primary reason for that was the community telling us, the people who were growing moustaches, the people who cared an awful lot about prostate cancer, were saying on a more and more regular basis that we ourselves or people that we are close to are struggling with aspects of mental health. And it just feels like a increasingly big and important issue, partly because we're talking about it more, mm-hmm. but also partly just because I think it was becoming more and more prominent in the experience of men. So it really was the community that drove us to that. And it started, and a lot of what we do is about suicide prevention. And it was because our Mo Bros and Mo Sisters were saying, actually, so the thing about Movember is actually you come together once a year and you often tell yourself stories about what's happened in the past year. Mm-hmm. And far too often we were hearing from the people that we come together with is that actually we had lost 1 or 2 people, 1 or 2 men in our lives to suicide. Mm-hmm. So, when you're a global community and you're hearing that on a regular basis, we felt we had something to do. We needed to do something about it. And I think many of the issues around mental health and suicide is to do with men being men. And Movember has proven that we are good at talking to and engaging men. So we felt we almost had a responsibility to use that skill set, the fun that we're good at generating and doing when people grow moustaches, celebrating the thing that men can do, taking that and bringing it in, driving the conversations that can save lives from a mental health perspective.
I love that.
So you mentioned having brothers and sisters involved in this. So how do women take part in Movember?
So when it started, the way that women took part was by kind of supporting and frankly giving permission for guys to grow moustaches. Because when we did this 13 years ago, the idea of having facial hair was still really unusual. We'd kind of been through the 70s and people didn't do it. So it was a really unusual thing to do. It's obviously much more common at the moment and more on vogue. So we talked and the idea of Mo Sisters came up really because they were supporting their men doing something for themselves, doing charitable activity. Men generally don't do things for charity. That's actually relatively unusual. And so it started with Mo Sisters being the supporters and actually saying there to guys, no, you go and do this stuff. We do a lot of stuff for breast cancer in the month of October. You go and do something and we'll support. Now we've evolved that actually Movember, you can do a physical activity for Movember. So if you don't want to grow a moustache, you can move for Movember. So you set yourself a target and do something. So obviously you don't have to have the ability to grow a moustache to do that. And we also encourage people to host events for Movember as well. So host a quiz, host a party, host a barbecue if you're lucky to live in a part of the world where the month of November is not too cold. But just do something to talk about men's health, to celebrate it and say that we care about the men in our lives. And that's not exclusively to men. So that's how women can get involved, and more of them do every year.
Cool. And so you mentioned it started in Australia. I know you're in the UK and now you're in the US. So how many countries is the Movember Foundation active in?
So we tend to say that we are active in 21 countries. The reality is this is a global movement and you can't stop people growing moustaches and talking about men's health. But 21 countries is where we tend to raise a fairly significant level of money that ends up getting invested back in. But actually, if you look across the board, there's nearly 100 places, countries where people would grow moustaches of some description. But 21 countries is where we kind of operate and actually spend money and do charitable activities based on the amount that's raised and put it into prostate cancer research or testicular cancer research or awareness of mental health.
Are there areas that you would like to get into further, or are you kind of hitting all the sweet spots for men's health right now?
Do you mean geographically, or do you mean
issue-wise and research and fundraising and other aspects that you?
I think for a while we should be sticking to the ones that we're doing because there's so much more to do. The fact that, more than 3/4 of people who take their own lives are men. The fact that prostate cancer will be the most common cancer of all types in the world in the next 10 to 15 years, yet it only happens to 50% of the population. The fact that there is a growing evidence base for residual problems caused by testicular cancer, which generally is treated well and that people don't lose their lives to it. But we know there's a growing number of young or people who were young men who were diagnosed with testicular cancer and now are starting to really feel effects of, fertility issues later in life or real fear of recurrence of cancer, lots of issues in terms of forming relationships. I think we've got enough to do at the minute. The other thing that we do in all of this is spread the word around men engaging better with their health. The reason that we do Move for Movember in the month of November is that we know that men need to take more physical, to be more physically active. We know that men need to think a little bit more about accessing help earlier than sooner rather than later. They're not doing enough of that at the moment. So I think if we stick to those three main causes and use that as the mechanism to amplify and talk about some of the wider aspects of men engaging in their health, that will help even for things like heart disease, for things like chronic pain. Because if you learn the lessons from all of that, then you've got a real chance of kind of getting guys to be diagnosed earlier for lots of different conditions. So further down the line, we might get involved in more, but I think there's enough to do in the main areas we're in at the moment.
Yeah, cool. And so we're getting towards the end of November. So I'm sure there's just no way that anyone could support Movember 2017, or is there?
Oh, how wrong you are, sir. Oh, how wrong you are. So we would absolutely encourage anybody that possibly can to register. Clearly, if you're going to start growing a moustache at this point in the year, it's going to be not that impressive by the end of the month, unless you're one of those people who grows them kind of overnight. But still, register. Show you care about this. I would love to encourage you to make a donation. I would love to encourage you to host an event, even if it's just a few guys getting together for a pizza and just having a conversation about some of this stuff. It doesn't have to be big and grandiose. If you want to make a $10 donation, but even if you just want to go out and spread the word and talk about this stuff, the more people that do it, the more momentum we will generate, the more of a snowballing effect. So go to Movember.com, absolutely, and get on board. And also that means we get your details so that next year we will come and start reminding you quite early in September so that you absolutely will be growing a moustache at the start of the year.
Oh, cool. So I wanted to ask if someone did want to get fully involved next year. So September is kind of the sweet spot to get people
going. We launch our website usually in early September. I mean, the website's there all the time, but the new campaign, we normally launch it in. So we start the conversation reminding people. But it's really important to say that Movember is a year-round foundation because we spend a month raising the money. We do actually raise money from some other activities across the year, but the bulk of the money that we raise in 1 month, but we are spending it all year round. We are funding nearly 1,200 programs globally at the moment, be it prostate cancer research programs, be it community engagement programs for mental health. So we're here all year and we talk to the community to tell them what we're spending the money on that they have raised, because it's really important. If you've gone through the pain of growing moustache, asking people to give you money for doing it, you want to know that we're spending it on something that's actually making a difference. So we have a real responsibility to do that.
Yeah, I actually was going to ask that if the fundraising activities were only restricted to like a certain period of the year or if it was something that happened year round. So now some of the other year round activities that you mentioned, that you alluded to, what are some of the types of activities that you guys do periodically through the year to continue to raising those funds?
So we do 2 groups of activity across the year. We're growing the amount of money or the amount of ways that we raise money across the year. So we know that the primary source of our income is always going to be the month of November. But it's things like people are starting to run marathons for us. They're doing kind of other fundraising events, peer-to-peer fundraising events that they might do in different markets, and doing it because they're saying that Movember is my charity of choice. So you might be doing the marathon, you might be doing your local fun run, and I want to do it for Movember. So we're starting to see a lot more of that. We are forming some partnerships with some big corporate organizations who actually want to be supporting Movember all year round. So we have some corporate partnerships. And one of the main reasons that that links into is that we try to talk at key points in the year about some issues that affect men. So at the moment, an example of this is in the first weekend of February is World Cancer Day. So we do some activity then to remind people that the issues that men face around cancer, to encourage them to go and to get diagnosed early on, to understand their risk factors. The month of April is Testicular Cancer Awareness Month. So we do quite a lot of activity in April around that. And that's often about telling guys to make sure that they are understanding what self-examination looks like. And, we tend to be quite kind of irreverent about that, and all the various jokes that you can make about checking your nuts, and we've got eons and oodles and jokes for that stuff, so we're good at that. We could do a whole month's worth of that, no problem. And then June we do some activity around Father's Day, because I think it's just a time that there's a key focus on men, and also it's kind of a bit of an understanding that often being a dad is a great thing and a challenging thing for men as well. And we know it's one of the main transition points in life where men sometimes struggle. So we can do activity around that. And then in September, we have World Suicide Prevention Day, which happens somewhere in the middle of the month. So you can see that there's kind of key points across the year that we're doing activity. And then for us, the month of November is the big one. And that's where we, do everything that we do to really bring the cause of men's health in the most general sense of the word to the fore.
Cool. So you're not just focusing on facial hair 1 month a year and disappearing and doing nothing the rest of the year at all?
No, unfortunately, I don't get to go and take the rest of the year off. It'd be a great job, really, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
No, it's and actually, we're already starting to think about future activity in 2018 and 2019. These things take a heck of a long time to build and to plan and to do them in a way that's exciting and engaging. So it goes on for a long time. But as I said earlier, for example, we are the biggest global funder of prostate cancer research in the world. We need to be out there talking to prostate cancer scientists. We need to be out there understanding what changes and what is happening in the world of science. So one of the biggest things that Movember does, and one of the reasons I'm proudest to be here, is that we don't just fund great work, we work really hard to share the outcomes from that great work as quickly as possible. So we never want to have things being, we don't want knowledge to become a currency. We don't want knowledge to be the thing that somebody uses as a way to get future funding for other activity. If you learn something about prostate cancer, we want to use our global network to share that information with as many scientists, as many doctors, as many clinicians as possible, so that it can get to men as quickly in a way that will make a difference. That's one of the really big drivers. That means we have to constantly be out there sharing the information and learning from others. It's about learning, and it's about knowledge translation, which is a huge aspect of what we do.
It sounds almost like the citizen science movement, where it grew out of that need to share information and not make it proprietary. Share the information, make it readily available, help whatever it is that information is being researched, get out there so more people could take full advantage of it and continue to build on that knowledge.
You're absolutely right. I have a huge amount of respect for researchers and the research community. I think there's some great stuff going on. However, it is a world that is slightly driven by perverse incentives. If you're a leader of a research institution, probably the key thing that you're measured against is not the science you're producing, but are you bringing in future funding? well, you're only going to bring in future funding if you don't actually solve the problem that you're there to solve. So if you take it to the ultimate degree, is there are a lot of great research institutions that you kind of ask, are they really set up to be finding the cure for cancer? Because if they find the cure for cancer, there might be a danger they won't be there the day after. So it's not as bad as that, but I think what it's really saying is that we need to work with people who want to accelerate to a point where we won't be needed anymore. And I always say, and I've said this a lot publicly, I said it in my previous role, my job as a charity chief executive, as a leader of charity, is to close this business down one day, because we're here to solve a problem. And if we're successful, the ultimate KPI is, we're here to stop men dying too young. Well, when men are not dying, they're living the same length of time as women, then ultimately you've done that job, and therefore you don't need a Movember to cure the ills of men's health anymore. So that's ultimately the type of people we want to work to. My job is to close this place down one day, and I want to work with people who cure with cancer and shut down their research institutions. Ultimately, it's kind of a bit simplistic, but that's the principle you're working on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very cool, because it's amazing how quickly and expansively you've grown organically just in the last 13 years. But yeah, you can just see how quickly you can stop your existence being required.
Yes, that's right. I mean, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
I'm not closing it down tomorrow. It's because there are still too many really significant issues in men's health. But I do feel that, the fact that you guys are having conversations like this and people are listening to them on podcasts and engaging in it, I just don't think that would have happened a while ago. So we at least acknowledge there's an issue. We at least are starting to reduce the stigma of some of the things that we're talking about. And mental health and suicide prevention are the ultimate examples of it. But actually, men are dying of ignorance around prostate cancer. They're dying not just because it's a dreadful disease, but they're dying with it because it's a disease that happens to guys below the belt. Because when you have to go and get tested for it, you've got to have conversations that actually hit at the very heart of what we define or traditionally defined it to be a man. So men shy away from that, so they go too late, they're diagnosed too late, and therefore they die too early, and often they die pretty they have unpleasant experiences through all of it. So all of this comes together. So we've got a long way to go, but what I do find very exciting, in 13 years we've set a different table. There is actually now a space to have these conversations. We have actually managed to reduce the stigma around this stuff. Now we actually have to get on and do something with it and really change behavior. We change the conversation. Now we've got to change the behavior.
Right. So that the subject matters, stigma's going away, and you've been around and done enough fundraising and research to not just be seen as, it's those silly mustache guys.
Yeah.
Right? You're really a global player in men's health. And that's the biggest surprise to me personally in learning about your organization.
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing that has gone well is that the silly moustache part of it, we've put good use to as well. So Movember is fun. The month of Movember is about growing a daft moustache. It's also about coming together with your friends, with your mates, with other people to celebrate this daft moustache and have fun doing it. And we've managed to use that fun as a vehicle for actually driving conversations, for having change, but also building a brand, and a brand that's fairly cool, a brand that's seen to be something you want to be part of. And once again, Movember has been great, and this is happened way before my time. I can't take any credit for it. But, when I was, for example, at Prostate Cancer UK and came into the world of prostate cancer research, it was not seen as a sexy area of cancer research that you would go into to be a prostate cancer research scientist. Well, actually, with the money that Movember's brought in, but also the kind of the brand and the fun and the coolness of it, prostate cancer is where young researchers want to go and work now. It's where the most exciting people want to be, because you get given a white coat with a moustache on it. You get to have fun. You get celebrated. We talk about our heroes. The heroes are the people who grow moustaches. They are the scientists. They're the lab technicians who are doing this stuff. It's not us. It's not anyone around. We made those people feel special. We made the researchers. We celebrated them. We carry on doing that. And actually, it's now an area that more people want to work in than used to be. And that's another real success of the Movember movement in the 13 years, and something that I think everybody here should be very proud of, because they put a lot of effort into it and it's made a real difference. And as I said, in the limited time I've been in it, prostate cancer has become a sexy thing to be involved in. And you would have never said that 7 years ago.
Right. I think you hit on a couple of really important factors there as far as the fun component. People love to do things that are fun, but even more so, that sense of belonging, particularly, every human being has that sense of belonging. And to be able to be part of a fun movement and belong to something that other guys are participating in and doing, I think has really, to me, it seems like it's really helped to drive that much more quickly versus as opposed to dry, conversations with slides that, will put you to sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that I've seen Movember do, and we did quite a lot when I was at Prostate Cancer UK as well. We have to talk to men about the issues that we're talking to them about in terms of their health in the way that they would talk to one another about everything else. There is no point doing it differently. There is no point making it too medical or even making it too kind of emotional or soppy or whatever the right word is. We need to talk, you need to go to where men are, and you need to talk to men like men if you're going to make a difference around this stuff. And that's a big part of what we've done as part of this movement. And that was why this idea of using a moustache and the celebration and doing move events, doing activity, but that's the platform by which you're having the conversations that can change lives, and it's not just the life that, it's not the information you give somebody and they use it in the month. It's a piece of information that they have and a change of behavior that might come into place next June when they need to do something. It might be the conversation that they're going to have with a friend and ask them if they're okay when they wouldn't have previously done it. It's all of that little incremental stuff that can make the big difference.
Yeah, I just had my first prostate check was just last year, and I remember posting on Facebook after it, like, "Oh, I finally feel like an adult. I had my prostate checked." But a few years ago, people weren't celebrating that at all. But
no, it's a new type of rite of passage in life, really. Isn't it? One of those things that was happening, but nobody was talking about it.
A hidden ritual of adulthood.
Absolutely.
I have a year to go before I get to have my first part of the ritual. So.
Well, there you go.
That's
awesome.
Appio, in the time I've known you, you've never had a mustache. Have you ever had one?
I actually have. Had a mustache. It was about 10 years ago or so. I actually had, goatee, actually, much like yours. A little more refined. But I am somebody who can grow a really impressive mustache in just about 4 days.
Wow.
So I still have time to do it.
Well, you do? All right.
You just set yourself up there. There's absolutely no excuse.
Nope, no excuse.
Yeah, I was just paving the way so we could play should be part of it next year, but you
well, we can still do
that. But by the time you're having dessert on Thanksgiving, I want to see how much is there, right?
All right.
I have to say, those people, I get very jealous of those people. My moustache is hard work, and it's still quite ropey when I get it there. But it's the people that literally kind of one of the strangest things now about Movember is, even when I started, it was seeing people growing. But nowadays, these days, you go into an office, it's actually, because the thing is, in theory, you start the month clean shaven. And so many people have facial hair. Is actually the biggest change now Movember has is you go in on the 1st and everybody turns up clean shaven, and you don't recognize most people that you work with anymore. But some people you then see grow something like virtually in the first morning of Movember. You can virtually see this thing popping up, and I'm sitting there squeezing away thinking it's going to be at least 2 weeks before this is barely noticeable. But we like to celebrate those that struggle the most and have the lamest mo. We really like to celebrate those guys because we feel they've gone above and beyond for the whole month. They've suffered in a way that makes a real difference.
Right.
Truly.
Right, yeah.
I have to agree.
Yep. I buy that. Well, cool. So, definitely next September, I'll take the.
We will hold you to that, guys. Well, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna hold you. We're gonna have you or someone else come on in September to get the advance word out.
Yeah.
And really try to drive up some. We've got a pretty large Real Men Feel community on Facebook, and we'll try to get a whole Real Men Feel mustache challenge going on, and I'll.
I'm down. I am so in.
Cool.
I'm looking forward to see. You've boasted big about this moustache, so we have to say.
Hey, I have to do something impressive by the end of the month here. So,
awesome.
I love it. So I was actually kind of curious about a lot of the information that you guys are sharing on the website, because I in particular, of course, because of my own personal involvement with with emotional intelligence awareness and mental health challenges and so forth, and not just involvement but experience with that as well. I one of the things that really kind of struck me was just the simple way you guys are presenting that information in ways that just kind of like it's there, it's available, and not making it too complex. And I guess that really talks to your approach. Speak to men in the way that men speak to each other. And is that how you present all of that information on the site?
Yeah, well, thank you for that feedback. That's nice to hear, because it means that we're doing something. Yes, that is. We aim. There's a few reasons for it. There is a level of speak. There is definitely a big part of it is speaking to men the way they speak to one another, and that they would want information about other things. Often you can go to other places if you are somebody who really wants a lot of the technical information and you want a lot of that, and that's what you might get from medical professionals. But we think, particularly because there's not a low base, but that broadly this stuff hasn't been talked about too much. It's much better to teach guys 2 or 3 things that they need to know that can take them to the next level and make a big difference. And so one of the things that we've done, for example, in the past 12 months that I'm most proud of is that for World Suicide Prevention Day, which was, as I said earlier, is at the beginning of September, we did quite a lot of activity on Facebook and on our own platform around a campaign that we called Unmute. And what we were doing with the Unmute campaign was really teaching guys the simple lessons that are about how you listen to what somebody's saying to you, the hidden cues in conversations. What's the real thing that's being said to you, but also what's the next level of skills that you need to ask questions. So when somebody says to you, typical kind of man thing, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. It's like, when and how do you need to ask the next level questions, and the questions beyond that actually help get to something, that you're not doing those superficial conversations that men have. So how do we give guys some just slightly different basic life skills that might help improve this stuff, alongside some additional life information and things that they need to know along the way, but always in a way that's entertaining, easy to remember, easy to access, and that is there, that is going to resonate with them, because there is no point doing it in a pious way. There's no point doing it in a scientific way or a complicated way, because it's only going to land with a very few people.
Right.
Yeah, you don't want to give people another reason to avoid the subject matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and if you can make it fun, if you can make it funny, if you can make it memorable, then you have a real chance of it sticking. We as guys, and this is a generalization, and I try very hard not to generalize about 50% of the population, but we're not very good at not feeling in control. We're not very good at not knowing things, which is often why we're not great at reaching out for information and reaching out for help at the earliest of stages. But it's good as a man to feel equipped with some information. It's good to feel I have a little bit more control, I have a little bit more knowledge. Then I like to know that I have some sense of participation in it. It's why guys respond very strongly to kind of lists and tasks and challenges that they want to do as part of their recovery and stuff like that. So we've done a lot of work in some of the areas that we've done around prostate cancer, and we've developed tools for guys to map where they are on the journey as they go through the journey of prostate cancer. And sometimes there are times when they're facing really severe incontinence, really severe impact on their sexual function. And guys don't like that, but actually if they know what they're going through is relatively normal and that it can get better and that they can be part of it if they do X, Y, and Z, they feel so much better. It matters a lot if your sexual function is really badly affected, but if you say, well, that happens to 7 to 8 out of 10 men every time, and it's normal and it will get better if you do X, Y, and Z, then men feel empowered around that stuff. They just don't want to feel helpless in the whole thing. They want to feel part of it. So that's a really good kind of, let's give them some simple things to do, some participation and feel engaged in it all. And it really has a very strong evidence base. It helps on that basis.
Yeah, I think it's true for all human beings, and men especially, just to find out that
you're not the only one.
Mm.
You're the one person in the world going through this right now, and it's never been happened before. And oh, wait, there's a community, and that's one of the great things of the internet and social media and your foundation of letting guys know they're not alone, and giving guys more information and letting them feel in control and empowered about it. And I did notice, you have a unique soap on the rope product.
We do, yes.
And what is that called?
Well, you can call it whatever you like, but essentially it is it's testicles on a rope in the shape of soap. But it's been a great tool to get us talking as men about the concepts of self-examination, the same way that women are being taught to do self-examination, their breasts, and obviously a shower is a great place to be doing self-examination. Actually, because it's from a physical response point of view, it's actually quite a good time to do it body-wise. But it's just been a brilliant conversation driver to kind of have the know thy nuts soap on a rope, shaped like a testicle. There's no other way to put it, and it's really been a great. Guys love it. We love to have a bit of a laugh and a bit of a joke around this stuff, and we like to be a bit silly about it. But actually somewhere in the background, if that's the thing that guys are going away kind of having a laugh, but realizing, you know what, it might actually change my behavior because I know a little bit more about testicular cancer and the signs and symptoms of it, then I'm all for that. I think it's brilliant.
Cool. So yet another way to get involved, to help raise money for all the great research you do and the suicide prevention and awareness is, instead of going to the malls on Black Friday and doing it, just go online and get, nutsack soap for everyone you know.
Absolutely. Go and buy yourself a scrotum, and it will, we should put it in the post to you. It will keep you clean, and it will teach you lots about your testicles. What more do you want?
Right. In fact, the know thy nuts stuck with me. So, it's like, yeah, I saw that. I laughed. I'm like, that definitely will stick with me now.
Yeah.
and Lori put it here in the chat. It's the perfect stocking stuffer.
Yes, I'd never thought of it that, because normally we launch it in April. I'd not thought of it as a Christmas gift, and all the ensuing jokes that you can do around stockings. But wow, I hadn't thought of that. I shall do a lot of work on that. There's a lot of material there, isn't there?
I sense a December campaign for you coming soon.
You're onto something.
Yeah. There we go. Lori has great ideas every single time where we have a conversation. She chimes in with something really good.
That is impressive.
Absolutely. So I'm actually kind of curious, circling back to a little bit slightly earlier conversation that we were having about is the reach of the Movember movement and how the majority of the donations tend to come from 21 different countries and so on. Where have you seen the greatest movement in the conversation and in the awareness? And what do you hope to see as far as areas of the world where there's a bit more resistance?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's, I think there's a flow, and I think, Movember started in Australia, and then it moved to the US and Canada and the UK, and now, a few years later, it's got into Europe, and we're seeing it in parts of Asia and parts of Africa now. I think as it moves through, it almost starts with cancer. I think cancer is one of those things that where you have men engaging in their health. It's a physical thing. It's almost, there's a perception is that it's this dreadful thing that happens to guys. There's not so much stigma around it. There is stigma around it, but there's not as much. And you almost need to be talking around cancer and general health first for men before you can really get into the issues around mental health. I think the stigma that still exists around mental health is greatest. And I don't think leading in the places where you're just starting the conversation around men's health with mental health is probably too big a jump. To get communities and societies to recognize that men's health is an issue, and to get them to recognize that mental health is an issue both at once, is probably too big a jump.
Right.
So that's tended to be the pattern of where we've got. And I think as you look across the markets and those that are emerging and the conversations are coming, is that you are starting to see them suddenly getting to grips with and starting to think about and address the issues of suicide, depression and mental health in the communities where they've been talking about cancer for a while. So I think, and as I sort of alluded to earlier, actually things like signs, the other reason we do a lot around testicular cancer is not just because of the effect it has. If I can get guys talking in their teens about their testicles and we can get them doing things at that point in time, then we have a chance that we're going to be able to talk to them about their mental well-being later on and prostate cancer later on. So actually, if you have those conversations earlier and you make them a bit funny, but you're talking about something quite scary and quite personal around your testicles, then we do set themselves up to be more mature and have the ability and the skills for conversations later in life. Clearly, mental health issues can happen to men and boys at any point in time, but at least if you've set up, let's talk about your testicles, let's talk about testicular cancer, then there is a skill set that probably they wouldn't have had previously.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of the testicular cancer, I remember seeing a campaign. It was like a campaign video not long ago, maybe about 6 or 7 months ago. And it's out of Australia, where an Australian rugby team was essentially being encouraged to know their nuts, essentially. Was that something that was inspired by Movember, or were you aware of that particular campaign at all? Or
yeah, no, it was inspired. The Know Thy Nuts is part of it. So yes, there's and we do tend to find that sport and rugby in Australia is they are great supporters of a lot of what Movember does, because one of the things that we know Movember has been from day one is it works very well for teams. It works very well, be it sports team, be it community teams, be it workplace teams. So of people who register to do Movember, somewhere between 65 and 75% every year are people who actually do it as part of a team. It might be the workplace, it might be just a few colleagues at work, it might be a few friends, or it might be your sport club. So actually those sort of conversations almost are easier to have if you're having them collectively, to be a bit silly about it. But also, particularly professional sports people, we want to work through with them, because they are guys who, once again, it's this concept of going to where men are. It's about, let's talk to guys about their health for a few minutes when they're going to a football game, when they're going to a rugby game, when they're doing, because that's when you're most likely to get through to them in that way. So that's a big part of what we do. So yes, that was absolutely out of likely to be something that we've done. And the other thing is we get some really great engagement pieces. We get great work coming from our community every year. Every point in this is that we come up with an idea, we come up with something like Know Thy Nuts, and they just run with it literally, and they'll take it so much further and go, have so many more great ideas about how they can spread the message, some of which we have to slightly close our eyes to. That's fine. That's fine.
For sure. We've had another one born tonight.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. So you mentioned the website earlier, but again, what's the best place for people to go if they want to get involved, right now?
Movember.com. It's that simple. And I think hopefully people will go and really like what they see and feel part of it. If you are able to donate, if you are able to register this month, please do so. We couldn't be more grateful if you do that. But also, know it's there all year round as a resource. It's a place that you can go and find out about some aspects of men's health, so it's there when you need it. So yes, please go to Movember.com. And if you know anybody who's going through the pain and the joy of growing a moustache, make sure you support them. Make sure you make a donation to them, because they need your love.
All right, beautiful. And so Appio, I'm gonna get you officially once again saying what your goal is, what you're gonna do this very month.
Okay. I haven't put a number on it just yet, but I absolutely will be going in there and registering, and that mustache starts tonight.
Fantastic.
So the razor may hit the rest of my face, but not here.
And so we'll at least update everyone at the end of November with a blog post and a photo at least.
Fantastic.
Absolutely, cool. Yes.
And then and for next year, really pledge. We'll do a show in September dedicated to Movember, and we'll get the whole Real Men Feel community. Get some people that probably haven't done this yet. Get some fresh mustache blood going. Some fresh knowers of thy nuts.
Exactly. Whatever we can do.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Beautiful.
Fantastic.
Awesome. So I want to thank you for joining us. I know, Owen, this is your busiest month. So I appreciate you making some time for us to get to know you and the foundation and all the good work that you're doing.
It's been an absolute privilege. It's been great to talk to you, and I've done my job. I've recruited another Mobro tonight, so that's good work for me. So no, it's been a delight, and thank you guys for all that you do as well. And having the conversation, spreading the word. 71 podcasts in is fantastic, and this is all part of we're all part of a broader movement for men's health. Talking about these things actually genuinely saves lives. So, on behalf of a lot of men out there, to you, thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing your mows either this year or next year, and both. I'm sure they'll be spectacular.
Beautiful. Yeah. So thank you. Thanks, Appio. Thanks, Lori. Everyone joining us live and listening to this whenever you're listening. And it's really cool to discover that mustaches can save lives.
Indeed.
So Real Men Feel will be taking a break for the holidays, but we're busy planning our big, bold, powerful, and fun series episodes for 2018. But I bet we'll pop up with a surprise or two before this year is out as well. Certainly with Appio's mustache update and perhaps something else in December. But officially, have a great holiday season. Happy Thanksgiving. Have a great Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Christmas, everything else that's out there. Whatever you invent. Festivus. My favorite is Festivus. I hope you don't air too many grievances. But whatever you do, grow your mustache, take care of your nuts, check your prostate, right? And be willing to talk, be willing to feel.
And most importantly, be willing to talk and feel.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks again, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
Folks.
Thank you for listening to Real Men Feel. Until next time, visit realmenfeel.org, join the Real Men Feel group on Facebook, and share what you thought of this show. Please give this podcast a review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you are discovering Real Men Feel. Reach out to us at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Learn more about Andy Grant at theandygrant.com and Appio Hunter at appiohunter.com.